Hello and welcome to the Advancing Success podcast, where we talk about all the amazing things that we do to help our clients achieve greater success. My name is Joe Sandine. I am the president and CEO of Onsharp, and today I'm here with Andrew Brown, who leads our discovery process. So we, for 24 years, we've been building custom websites, apps, and software development solutions for our clients. And so the first phase of a project like that is always a discovery phase where we really get in and understand the client's needs, do architecture, kind of build out what the solution is going to look like before we decide to charge forward. So today, Andrew and I are going to be talking about that discovery process a little bit, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the different considerations that go into it, some of the things that we've learned along the way, so that we can help you next time you go into a discovery project for a new piece of software or a website or, wherever the world takes you. So Andrew, the first question I have for you, having been doing a lot of discoveries for a variety of clients that we work with, are you seeing some common trends in the problems that they're facing or the issues that they're trying to solve or the types of solutions that they're trying to build?
Yes, I would say commonly, we kind of have two primary audiences. I guess we have a lot of people come to us who want something for an internal tool, like a portal, right? Portals are big. We've done a lot of those.
Yep.
And then the flip side is, the websites, which obviously we've done many of those. And there you're giving, our customer is delivering a solution to their customer.
Yep.
On the flip side, sometimes the customer comes to us and we're building internal for them. And so I think common things that I've seen lately in discoveries has been that there are still a lot of outdated business tools being used.
Yep.
And they've
a lot
hung
of
on.
antiquated systems that people are still struggling with.
And they've hung on for a long time for various reasons, right? They serve a purpose. But there's a new, it's not a new push, but there's a push to get modern, both in, we're not necessarily always overhauling like, I'm moving from an AS400 to SQL or whatever, right? But to take steps so that like we can take advantage of some of the new like BI tools or, there's so much data that these customers have that they can't really use because it's stuck in an AS4.
Sure. Yep.
And so there's a lot of customers who come to us to help them build solutions for themselves and utilize information. They know they have this, but they don't know what to do with it or how to get it. And we can help them in that regard. And then, there's always a host of people who are looking to improve their customer experience. E-commerce companies selling products. We work with a lot of manufacturers, or at least I've done a lot of discoveries on manufacturing companies lately.
Yep.
And they are, looking to modernize, for better or worse. Amazon has kind of set a gold standard for e-commerce shopping. And a lot of people want some sort of functionality like that, right? Like,
sure.
To make it easier for their customers to shop their products, buy their products. But then in addition to that, there's a lot of customers who want to give more data to the customer through like a customer login, like a customer portal, right?
Yep.
So I can view all this history of orders. And
so it sounds like you have some situations where they just have an antiquated system that needs to be replaced. So you're replacing maybe more of the core. Mm-hmm. We just need to get rid of this thing and migrate our data into some new platform that we can build our business off of in the future, which to me is different than, hey, we're going to keep our core system, but we just need to create additional, avenues into the information to allow customers to place orders or allow employees to access information. What I would call more like net new functionality. How much net new functionality are you seeing compared to the situation of, hey, I want to like totally gut what we have? Yeah,
I would say we probably see more net new or add-on functionality than total gutting because there's a lot of internal business practices that rely on whatever they have in place. And, it's easier to bolt something new on which isn't always the best thing, maybe, right? Because we're still tied to the original wagon, right?
But yeah, I mean, but the reality is, I think a lot of businesses have, built their whole business on a tool that all departments use, and to completely migrate away from that tool is a pretty big task, and it incorporates a lot of change and a lot of disruption in the business. So it's obviously a big factor.
And I think a lot of what we're doing at times can be a proof of concept that it's okay to move away from this, right? So they may say, I think we need to modernize X business practice. And so we would like to work with you to understand how we would do that, right? And then add on to that or slowly transition over.
Yep.
So not a full scale cut off. We're abandoning all the old stuff, right?
Yep. So using a term like add-on is a good segue into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is we use a term called MVP around here a lot, minimum viable product. And so for those who aren't familiar with what that means, that's trying to get a solution out the door that minimally meets your business requirements, doing what you need to do to get it out the door, knowing that you can then iterate going forward. I think that can be a tough concept for clients to grasp because they want as much as possible right out of the gate, right? They want every bell and whistle that they've ever dreamed of to be in there. But as we know, as consultants, that's not necessarily a great use of your time because you can end up building a lot of features that the customer actually maybe you thought were great, but the customer's never going to use. So explain to me a little bit, how do the clients receive our push to try to keep them in that MVP mindset versus them wanting to get out of that because they're a little antsy maybe to build everything they're hoping and dreaming for right out of the gate?
I mean, I think you hinted at it. It's important to highlight if people aren't going to use this, it's not a good investment of our time to build a feature that we think is going to have great use, but we build it and then
but we haven't proven that that's going to be the case.
And like there's lots of sayings, walk before you run, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
But it does apply, and especially if you're introducing something that's, I don't want to say extremely new to your customers, but any new thing is change, right? And so if you introduce a lot of change at once, there's a bigger barrier for that customer to actually want to engage with you in whatever way. And so pick the things that, if there's one or two really critical functions you want, we should focus on making those work very well, right? And then we can expand out from there.
So how do you help them identify that? How do you help them work through the process of figuring out what's really core and what really is going to have to be there versus what is maybe on the chopping block to be a phase 2 or a phase 3 item? Do most clients understand that inherently when you work with them, or do you have to really dig in the weeds to help them figure that out?
Yeah, I think a lot of people understand their customers well enough to know these 2 or 3 things are what we should focus on initially. But there are often times where, you got multiple voices in the room.
Yeah.
And based on their position in the company, they may have a different opinion, right? And so a part of, my job is to listen to all of that because we want the full picture, right?
That's a really good point you make. So in the discovery process, how do you normally guide the client to understand who should be in the room with us? How many people? So, I mean, we all know that sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen leads to a disaster, right?
Okay.
So what does success typically look like when you think of the right people in the room?
Yeah, I think sometimes we'll have one person and find it's not enough, right? And
so what would be an example of why that's not enough? Just one person?
Yeah. So maybe we get a single champion from the customer who's championing this idea, right? And they're not an expert in functionality that we're trying to introduce, right? Like, these are the things that, maybe they did a poll internally or they asked and they're told, well, we should work on these things and you just run point on it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really always work. I mean, it's good to have a counterpoint that's a go-to, but we need to have the right people at the table because it becomes this game of, well, we decided this, and then I brought it to so-and-so, and they said, no, that's not going to work. And so we need to rethink about this, right?
So rather than that point person having to go back in-house all the time and run things by people, you would rather have the right minds in the room at the moment to have the discussion.
Right. And to not always have the people in if they're not, needed for the conversation of the day. Like we don't need someone from every part of the company, marketing and sales and engineering, and so ahead of time, right, when we walk through the discovery process, I will let them know this is what we're going to discuss, right? If we kind of look at what a week to week or what a start to finish looks like.
So like in the kickoff meeting, I'm assuming somehow you'll break down the future
agendas.
The future agendas, who's going to have to be there, what's going to be discussed at each meeting to help the client guide who's got to be there.
Right. And sometimes everybody's there and it works, but it is important to make sure we have the right people in the right seats and we can get the answers. Otherwise, you need all the information to make the right decision, right?
Yeah.
So if you're lacking that, then we're not really doing it justice to the customer because we're not fully exploring that need.
Yeah.
So
I'm assuming that you've had situations where everyone's not in agreement on how something should function or what it should look like, or, whether it's a high level business requirement or a low level design thing. How do you normally facilitate that? How do you get the client maybe back on track when things might start going off the rails because maybe they can't agree internally on what they want?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have to say, let's table this, right?
Sure.
I do think it's important to say we have two people, sometimes there's two strong opinions that are not the same. I think that I almost sit in like a mediating role, It's important that both opinions are heard, right?
Yep.
And I like to make sure that we actually understand both positions. Usually when this comes up, it comes up later on after we've talked about high-level objectives. We get a little further into how do we actually want to make this, how is this going to work UI, UX wise? And
so the rubber's hitting the road and maybe people have an opinion of how it should specifically look.
Right. And I guess oftentimes the most I can do is say, well, this, based on my experience, based on the things we've done, I would recommend we go with opinion A, right?
Yeah.
Saying that delicately, right?
Yeah. Well,
opinion B isn't wrong.
I'm assuming that there is an ultimate decision maker at the client, right?
Right.
And so that needs to be clear,
right?
Because we can't facilitate a gridlock necessarily.
Right.
So
and oftentimes the ultimate decision maker will put their foot down, even in the meeting.
Yeah.
But I think, it is important to hear the opinions that are present, right?
Yeah.
So thankfully I don't have to say, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah. So a client wants to do a project. They come to us for discovery because we need to map it out. We start the process. We're working meeting over meeting to understand what they need, figure out how this thing's going to work. At some point, we get to a phase in the game where, okay, we know what we need to know, and now we need to start actually putting the solution together. Can you? That's where we start seeing the tangibleness, I think. So, talk me through a little bit what tangible looks like. Then, what do we give to the client as an end result, as far as visuals to look at, design documents? Like, I think a lot of times the discovery process can sound mysterious and non-tangible. And so I want to help people understand the tangible output.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So as we go through the whole process of discussing all these different areas that we've really kind of solidified agendas, high-level agendas, I guess, or main talking points that we build off that everyone, right? Every discovery varies. But so that process will go for a number of weeks and we'll have design in the middle of that, right? So we get client feedback. We'll do a first pass. Are we on the right path? Yes, we are. It looks great. I love it. And then we start adding in the things we've talked about in terms of what is a user going to do in here, right? And then as we don't go final on the design, right? Because that'll happen during implementation. But you get basically an app from, if we talk about an app, right? Splash screen. Oops, sorry.
Yeah,
Splash
so
screen to finish, right?
I know we use the term wireframes a lot.
Yeah.
So are you building wireframes technically, or are you getting down into the nitty gritty of the design in the
design.
deliverable? Like, so they're seeing kind of what a finished product would look like?
Yeah. Yep. And prototyped into, with a prototype.
Yep.
Figma, right?
So Figma is the tool that we use to allow them, just so I'm clear.
And you can kind of click through and you can see.
They can almost walk their way through it.
Right.
Yep.
So it looks like and feels like.
It's not just a picture. It's actually somewhat of a functional, navigable, work your way through it so you can kind of get a feeling for what the user flow is going to be.
Yeah, it's not a 2D Visio chart, right? Which those serve a purpose too. But
how about all the business rules and logic and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
How do you capture that?
Yeah, so that's the second important component, I guess, and that's all the user stories is typically how all of that's written out. So, oftentimes there's multiple roles who are going to use this, and so we'll document. I'm Joe, right? As Joe, I need to do X, Y, Z, right? And as Andrew, I need to do X, Y, Z.
Yep.
So it's very clear. Like, these are the audiences who are going to use it. This is what they can do. If there's prerequisites, those are included, right? Like, so you really have, if you look at the design doc and you read the scope with it, you could read through and understand like, oh, this business requirement is captured with this user story.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And then all of that is put into a 70-page doc sometimes. And
so a lot of detail.
Yeah. Lots of stories.
So there's a reason why we're doing this. There's obviously a blueprint that's created so that it's crystal clear what we're going to be building and what they're going to be receiving. And obviously, I guess shifting into my next question, the whole point of doing this is to then be able to give the client an understanding of cost, right? And timeline. So how do we break that down then? Do you give them a detailed, do you break it down in detail? Like, all these features are going to take this amount of time. What's the estimate look like?
Yeah. Typically we will give a timeline estimate in terms of development hours and overall project hours.
Yeah. Because
there's testing and QA and project management and all that. And with that comes a budget, right? Based on rates. And then if requested, we'll give a detailed estimate, but usually we estimate.
You're giving more of a high level.
At a high level. Yeah. We, there are definitely clients who want the detailed estimate because they will make additional cuts based on budget, right?
So for example, you propose something, it's maybe a little out of budget range. So then they want to be able to break into the nitty gritty and say, okay, then let's cut this and this and this.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you were asking earlier about MVP, sometimes budget gets you there, right?
Oh, of course.
And
because it is what it is.
And
right?
that's, it's a harder line in the sand when the dollars aren't there. So we don't build that feature.
Yeah. So let me go back a little bit and ask you, how do you make sure that, because I think when you're in discovery, obviously you want to make, hopes and dreams come true, right? So we're going to talk about not only what they want today, but what they want in 5 years from now out of this thing. But obviously every client going into it has either a set budget or a set budget range that they're like, okay, we have this amount of tolerance. How do you manage to the budget tolerance when you don't necessarily know, especially at the beginning, all the fine details until you maybe get closer to the end? How do you make sure that you essentially come out at the other end not shocking them with something that's way different than what they expected?
Sure. Yeah, I think, like you said at the beginning, it's really hard to know. We might have they give a number, like I'd like to be under X. And that's good knowledge to have, right? And as we go through discovery,
it's got to be more of a gut at that point.
It is a
gut feeling.
Right? But, we kind of have some baselines too. Like, you want to do a new app, it's going to be 6 figures. Like, I mean, you can't really build a quality app.
We know from past experience, having done lots of projects, whether a client's going to come in with a rough number that just either feels or doesn't feel possible.
Right. Yep. And then as we go, that is another, I talked about budget, cutting things. I do try and keep in mind, if I was the customer and I'm spending this investment, is this a feature that I want to spend the money on? Right.
Right.
And so when there are asks that are really like pie in the sky, it'd be so cool if we could do X. Like everything is possible, right?
Yeah, but everything comes at a cost.
But everything comes at a cost.
Yep.
And those are things where when you talk about future phases, those are things that can be looked at in the future.
Yeah. And I think honestly, having 24 years ago, I started this business as a college kid.
Yeah,
and I think one of the things I appreciate most about the team is we're very honest and transparent.
Yeah.
We're not willing to be a devil's advocate. We're not afraid to be a devil's advocate. We're not afraid to say, hey, we can do that.
Yeah.
But it just may not be worth it.
Right.
And so I think it's healthy that we're willing to have those conversations in discovery so that we don't lead them astray, essentially.
Yeah. We're, like you said, we're trying to improve something for them, right? Accelerate success, right?
Yep.
We're not trying to price maximize.
Right.
And so, I treat them like I'd want to be treated. I don't know anybody who likes to be, have the wool pulled over their eyes, right? So it is important to talk about budget, even though it can be kind of something people don't maybe want to talk about, right?
Yep.
We don't ask those questions because we want to maximize budget. We ask those because it really feeds into priority or product or feature prioritization and what's possible in a phase one or an MVP, and then what might fall in a subsequent phase.
Yep. We present the final deliverable, walk through it with the client, kind of give them everything they need at that point. What comes next?
At that point, I say I really enjoyed working with you, and I can't wait for you to work with our project managers.
So then the client's in a position where, and I think I've really enjoyed the way we do this as well. We've given them everything they need now. It's like you've got you know exactly what this should look like, all the detail, all the specs. We'll tell people, this is yours now. Obviously we want to work with you to build this.
Right.
But maybe sometimes the timing's maybe not right. Maybe they need to wait a little bit.
Yep.
Or I always tell people, back when I was ingrained in the process too, they have every right to go shop it with another company, do whatever they want. This is their asset now to keep. But, we've invested so much time together at that point. I think the next best appropriate step, obviously, and most efficient thing to do is now continue that partnership and work together and move into development. So what does moving into development look like? How does that transition happen?
Yeah. So, when we present the final scope and they say, yeah, we love it. We loved working with Andrew. Then we'll internally prepare to transition this to our development team. And so, I'll meet with the PMO and typically the lead developer and give a real overview of these are the things we talked about. It is documented, but there is context that I have just in conversations over the course of time,
And obviously there's been developer involvement in the estimating.
Correct.
So it's not like this is new information to the developers.
Right.
I think it becomes more of a process of breaking it down into what we call sprints of 1 week or 2 week cycles of breaking down the bigger project into smaller milestones and confirming the timeline and that kind of stuff. So,
and then that's, talking about user stories, really that's like what we try. The whole idea behind the user story is I can test that story when I'm done, right? So when we get into development, we have kind of already preset up chunks of functionality that we can test against, and then the user can see progress, in that whole story, right?
Yep.
Doesn't always work out that way because sometimes there's foundational aspects that need to be there. But I think the most fun is getting to know these people over the course of the discovery process. And then of course you have to have a bit of an attachment. You can go elsewhere, but please don't,
we love building. I mean, we're tech people. We love We love the creativity. We love the change that technology brings. I mean, we obviously enjoy the discovery process, but what we really love is then building it and making the dream come true.
Right. And then you get something tangible, right?
Yeah.
And I like that we don't build stuff for the sake of building it. We build something to
make an impact,
right? Yeah. And so, I enjoy that aspect of this work, right? There is a tangible outcome at the end, right?
Yeah.
Just like I love mowing the lawn. Because I mow the lawn, I can see I did it, right?
Yeah.
I get that same kind of
mowing lawn grass, right?
Right. You can get that same satisfaction. It's a little longer here.
Yeah.
But you feel like you're doing something positive. So,
so let's go back to the beginning a little bit. The world's evolving very quickly with AI and so many cutting edge technologies coming out there. What would you say to someone or a business who's maybe on the fence about getting started on this software development or any form of techie project that maybe they've been dreaming about for a while, have in the back of their head, but they're just kind of hesitant, maybe because they just don't understand the process or how to do it, or they're scared, or maybe they've been burned before. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great values of Discovery is it's not a full-scale commitment to actually putting something in place that's, very costly potentially. So it gives you the opportunity to explore those ideas that you have, right? With someone who's implementing those things, right? It's not just bouncing it off a friend, right? We're qualified to give consultation in these, right? And say this is what's worked well and what hasn't. And from there, then they can say, yes, we want to proceed, or maybe now the time isn't right, but now we have the plan for when we are ready, right?
Yeah.
So it's that entry, it's not the full scale commitment, but it really does give them a better idea of, I think, is this a pursuit we want to, go through with, or do we need to change our thinking?
Well, and honestly, I think another outcome that can be very healthy for a business is we're going to make the investment to go in and do discovery and architect this thing. And maybe we come out of the other end confirming that this isn't the right project for us, or this was the wrong solution, or now is not the right, and you actually save yourself, because so many companies will just jump straight into building something. Or they'll work with a company that, within a 30-minute conversation gives them a full proposal. And I just don't understand how that's realistic or possible or fair and accurate, right? So
it's not.
I think you could also look at discovery as a risk mitigation tool,
certainly
in its lowest form, to where it could actually save you from spending a bunch of money that you maybe shouldn't have in the first place.
Right. Or maybe you realize it's going to cost 10 times what we thought it was going to cost to do this.
Yep.
And so, we need to wait rather than start into it. And then you get committed to the path you're on, and then throw in bad money after good, or good money after bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
I think that was a great conversation. Thank you for your expertise and guidance. And
I enjoyed talking.
It's been a fun conversation. So
I like this.
Well, thank you for listening. Again, that was a conversation with Andrew Brown, who leads our discovery team, talking about all the great ins and outs of our discovery process. If you're running a business, working in a business that has been thinking about building a technology tool, or just has an idea for how to improve your business and you just don't know where to start, we are always here to help. Feel free to give us a call, send us an email, fill out a form on our website. We would be more than happy to have a conversation and guide you in the right direction and help steer the ship so that you can make sure that your business continues being successful. So until our next podcast, have a good one.